Well, here we are for another week of North Star Oasis. I'm your host, Jeff Williams. Thank you for joining us today. We have another action-packed episode. But before we start on this May the 16th, 2015, I want to start off with remembrance of somebody. If you recall last week's show, we were discussing the Federal Reserve System. A couple of hours after we had finished our show, an Elk River police officer named Todd Besser was shot and killed by one of his sons. It's a family tragedy, really, really bad situation. Todd Besser served in the same unit that I did in the Air Force Reserve, and his ex-wife, Tammy, also was with that unit. I did not know Todd all that well, but his ex-wife, Tammy, she and I were both in the same career field in information management at the time, so I've gotten a chance to know her real well. I've met their sons a few times, and so I just want to take a moment as we begin today's show just to remember Officer Todd Besser and ask that you keep the family in thoughts and prayers at this time. Todd's and Blake's funeral will be held tomorrow afternoon at the Elk River High School. And so this is a trying time, not just for the Besser family, but the entire Elk River community. So I want to start off today with that note. I know it is a little bit somber. Unfortunately, today it doesn't seem to get too much better, although we do have a little bit today that we hope will be a little bit more positive and even have a little bit of humor to it. Right now, there's 222 shopping days left until Christmas, and as I was talking to our producer before the show, he said that he's finally figured out what he's going to get me for Christmas, and he was hinting around, and finally he just spilled the beans, and he said he's going to get me a train conductor's hat, so that way I can wear on the set every time we do a railroad segment, because we seem to be doing a lot of them these days, but the biggest thing is railroad issues are in the news, and that's the reason why we keep running with them. As we've been having a regular segment on the show in the last few weeks, we're going to continue again today. In 87 weeks and 5 days, we will be having a presidential inauguration. And I know what you're saying. Oh, geez, I can't wait for it to be over already. We haven't even gotten into the beginning of this. But what we've been doing on North Star Oasis in the last few weeks is we've been taking the candidates for president in the order in which they announce. So we've already done Hillary Clinton. We've already covered Ted Cruz. We've covered Rand Paul. We did Rand Paul last week. And today is Florida Senator Marco Rubio. And so we're going to show you highlights from his speech in under 2 minutes, courtesy of, I think, Reuters. Or is it Bloomberg?
That is why tonight, grounded by the lessons of our history, but inspired by the promise of our future, I announce my candidacy for President of the United States. I chose to make this announcement at the Freedom Tower because it is truly a symbol of our nation's identity as a land of opportunity. And I am more confident than ever that despite our troubles, we have it within our power to make our time another American century. It's because while our people and our economy are pushing the boundaries of the 21st century, too many of our leaders and their ideas are stuck in the 20th century. And they have forgotten. They have forgotten that when America fails to lead, global chaos inevitably follows. A leader from yesterday began a campaign for president by promising to take us back to yesterday. If we reform our tax code and reduce regulations and control spending and modernize our immigration laws and repeal and replace Obamacare, if we do these things, If we do these things, the American people will create millions of better paying modern jobs. And if America once again accepts the mantle of global leadership. By abandoning this administration's dangerous concessions to Iran and its hostility to Israel. I've heard some suggest that I should step aside and wait my turn. But I cannot, because I believe our very identity as an exceptional nation is at stake, and I can make a difference as president.
Well, as we are in our continuing coverage of showcasing the presidential candidates, what we try to do is show highlights from their announcement. In the case of Hillary Clinton, she just gave us a video, and that's what we played. And then we ended up playing a Saturday Night Live skit just to show a little bit of counterbalance. But what we try to do is show something from their speech, show a little bit of criticism that they've been getting, and then give an opportunity to show one of their ads unhindered, uninterrupted. Because we believe here on North Star Oasis that a lot of times we feel the need to show you some of this stuff without a filter. And yet there's still a counterbalance here with both sides, and so we just try to be fair to all candidates involved. So right now what we're going to do is show how Marco Rubio's speech was received by people who were, in attendance, both good and bad. And over the next 80-something weeks, we'll be giving a lot more in-depth coverage. So right now we're just skimming the surface.
Continue our team coverage with reaction to Marco Rubio's big announcement. From local leaders to those opposing what Rubio stands for, just about everyone seems to have an opinion on Rubio's candidacy. CBS 4's Cynthia Demas joins us live with what everyone had to say. Cynthia.
Yeah, Erica, about 1,000 people were packed inside the Freedom Tower for the big announcement, but there were a couple hundred people outside across the street in protest. Those gathering to support Marco Rubio were thrilled with what they heard.
We must change the decisions we are making by changing the people who are making them.
Including major donor and auto tycoon Norman Brayman.
It was a great day. It was just wonderful. Couldn't have been any better.
Doral Mayor Luigi Boria.
We need fresh blood to the arena.
Former Doral City Manager Joe Carollo discussing Rubio and Jeb Bush.
If anything, it shows how many good candidates the Republicans have. The Democrats only seem to have one old warhorse.
And Miami Mayor Tomas Regalado echoing the sentiment.
I'll be hoping and willing to work for any candidate that gets the nomination.
And so tonight I'm asking you to take that first step with me.
But outside of the Freedom Tower, those protesting Rubio didn't like what he had to say.
If we remember that all human life...
A large group called him a flip-flopper on immigration.
We want him to stand with our undocumented community. We know he has not done that.
Next Gen Climate Change says Rubio does not recognize climate change as man-made.
The seas are going to rise.
We're going to be underwater if people like Marco Rubio get in.
Okay, we're going to be underwater if people like Marco Rubio. We heard that 35 years ago from the actor Ted Danson, who played Sam Malone on Cheers. 35 years ago, by the year 2000, we're going to be underwater. Those oceans are going to rise. And you know what? 35 years later, they are still at the same level they were before. If you notice the protesters, they were all having the same issues. We want Marco Rubio to stand with undocumented workers. Hint to the rest of society, those would also be called illegal aliens. And then climate change denier. I'm a climate change denier. I don't believe man-made global warming exists. And we will be having more discussions on this later on because there are some scientific basis, scientific reasonings about my opinion about this whole global warming myth. And we'll be exploring those. And I will just give you a little brief. Check the solar cycle. That there is about a 17-year solar cycle, and the level of the solar cycle and how strong it is has an impact on solar flares, which has an impact on El Nino and La Nina, and the positioning of the polar jet stream and the position of planets and their seismic activity or the gravitational pull has a relationship to certain seismic activity, which gives us earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, and it happens on a cycle. Hurricanes, floods, droughts, it all happens on a cycle. But that's just the quick 10,000 foot level. But the thing is, if Marco Rubio doesn't stand with them, well, I don't either. And there's some reasons behind that. And yet we see the same protesters coming from the Democratic Party, and yet we never see Republicans protesting Hillary Clinton. They never cover that. We don't see protesters covering Bernie Sanders or Martin O'Malley, but yet are there protesters at those? I'm pretty sure there is. So with Senator Rubio, he is in the race. He joins again Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, and there's a bunch of other candidates who declared since. But we're going to continue this as a long-running discussion as part of our showcase. And so for Senator Marco Rubio, welcome to the 2016 presidential race. And it's going to be a long fight. Good luck. But I say that for every candidate. Good luck. And I know we'll be covering all of these candidates a little bit later. But right now, what we're going to do is actually look back at a previous presidential candidate who's actually back in the news again for something that happened just yesterday. And let's actually show you the preview clip because it involves a boxing match.
Hi, I'm Mitt Romney, and you may recognize me from television or the news or just around town. You've heard my critics say that I'm out of touch, that I'm stiff, that I just don't relate to people. For years, I've been listening to garbage like that, and I've decided to fight back. How do you do that? By taking on the former heavyweight champion of the world.
I train every day for people a lot tougher than Mitt Romney. Does he even work out? I have to go out and do the best that I can.
You may think this is just a joke, but I'm taking this very seriously. Hello?
Realized that that day I got to be the very best. I believe I can do it.
Well, it's true. I don't have much of a right hook, but when I get somebody's ear, I can be pretty formidable.
He'll throw punches, but I'm too quick, too agile for him. Mitt, you can't run, you can't hide. Come get your whooping.
In all seriousness, Evander and I are coming together to support an extraordinary.
Or another, the rest of that clip got cut off, but what happened was last night was Mitt Romney and Evander Holyfield went at it in the boxing ring for charity, and it was Charity Vision, which fights blindness in some of the poorest countries in the world, and they had corporate sponsorship that raised from $25,000 to $250,000, and the fight ended up raising over $1 million for the charity that former Governor Romney announced on Twitter after the fight. So now, how did that fight end up? We will find out after we show you Marco Rubio's commercial, because we do this with every presidential candidate. I got so enraged on the global warming debate that I had completely forgotten that we have to show you the unedited version of Senator Marco Rubio's commercial, and then we'll come back to Romney versus Holyfield.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming today as this nation begins a process of electing the next president of the United States. In his first official campaign trip since announcing his candidacy, please join me in welcoming someone who is a great leader for this country, someone who stands and represents our future, Senator Marco Rubio.
I'm glad to be here because I think we're The reason why I want to run for president is because how strongly I feel about the era in which we live in and what it can mean. The better paying jobs of today require more education, but we have only one way of providing higher education in America. And that is we tell everybody you either go to a traditional college or you go nowhere. That doesn't work anymore. For starters, we got to graduate more people from high school ready to go to work. To be welders, electricians, BMW technicians. These are not bad jobs, these are good jobs. The 21st century, this post-industrial economy has even more promise. I don't think we can save the American dream, I think we can expand it. It's really a privilege to be here. Actually, it reminds me very much of the first time I ever ran for office. I ran for a small city commission, the city of West Miami, Florida. It has 5,000 residents, about 800, 900 people vote in the election. And the way you get elected there is you just knock on people's doors. You do parties like this. The only thing missing is the Cuban coffee. But, next time. I believe with all my heart that America's greatest days are right around the corner. Now it is up to you and I to go out and to seize it, to be the party of the future, to show those who are trying to improve their lives that we are the party with the idea.
And there's the party of the, somehow or another, we're having some equipment malfunctions today, so please bear with us. But in the meantime, we are going to go back to Salt Lake City, and you are going to catch probably the only time on broadcast TV the entire Mitt Romney, Evander Holyfield fight. And there's a reason, because this was a fabulous event. But in the interest of time savings, we're going to go right to the fight.
First to make his way to the Charity Vision Ring, please welcome Mitt Romney.
As Governor Romney comes into the ring, after the fight last night, he had tweeted out tonight, at Charity Vision raised $1 million, which will help 40,000 people have their sight restored. His wife, Ann Romney, loved being part of Mitt's posse tonight. Hashtag CV Fight Night.
Ann Romney is wearing and now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome his opponent, Evander Holyfield.
There's the former heavyweight champion.
Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you have all been waiting for. This may well be the most anticipated matchup of the century. Two of the world's most recognizable heavyweights, both enduring brutal low blows in their respective careers, and both known for not pulling any punches inside or outside the ring. This bout sanctioned by the Peachwazo Utah Athletic Commission, their director Bill Colbert, and Commission Chair Rich Montanez are with us ringside. Real Event Center, Salt Lake City. Can you feel it? This bout scheduled in the heavyweight ranks, and introducing first, standing on my right and fighting out of the red corner, wearing the red satin, with suit and tie.
Now, I know the Democrats out there are thinking that he's pretty stiff. But I'll bet right now the Republicans and the Democrats are both hoping that Evander Holyfield wins.
I'm kind of liking former Governor Levitt's bling here this evening. Let's do this again. Standing on my right and wearing the red trunks trimmed in white, he weighed in at a ready 179 pounds. He'll make his boxing debut here tonight in Salt Lake City. His political record, 1 win and 1 very big loss. He's the former governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the head of the 2002 Winter Olympic Games, and the reigning, and some wish defending, Republican candidate for the presidency of these United States. Fighting out of Massachusetts by way of Salt Lake City, Utah, ladies and gentlemen, introducing Mitt the Glove Romney.
I will have to say that Romney does not look bad for a 68-year-old.
Fighting out of the blue corner, wearing the black trunks, he weighed in at 5-time at 236.5 pounds. His professional record, 44 wins with 10 losses, 2 bouts scored even, 29 of those wins coming by way of knockout. He fights out of Atlanta, Georgia. He's the former WBA, WBC, and IBF heavyweight champion of the world. He is the only 5-time heavyweight world champion. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing Evander Holyfield. Your referee for this contest is Larry Fulmer.
All right, I want a good, clean fight. No headbutts, no low blows. Mitt, no biting. Get back to your corners and come out when the bell rings.
And here we are getting ready for the very first round. Like I was mentioning earlier, I think Republicans and Democrats alike are both going for Evander Holyfield. The reason being is, of course, Mitt being a Republican, that would make him not well liked by Democrats who are watching this. But on the other hand, because he did not win in 2012 in the presidential election, I think that Republicans are kind of seeking revenge here too. And we're off in the first round. So far, there's a good jab by Romney. And the ring is 19.5 feet, so there is plenty of room in the ring for each man to operate. They seem to be taking up a lot of real estate. More good jabs by the former governor. Romney looks winded already. Probably wondering how Holyfield is able to do that all these years. There we go. We got hit in the midsection going on. Holyfield showing a good combination with some moves laterally inside and out. And that was a busy first round with some good action. As the bell rings and we're at the close. As each respective fighter goes to their corners, the question will be, who has the stamina? And here we go again in the second round. Is Romney a bleeder? This is his first fight. Trying to get inside. Holyfield at age 52 is showing his age. And he has the former governor up against the ropes. The referee breaks it up. And the dodging here seems to be pretty artful tonight. Just a reminder that you are watching the Mitt Romney Evander Holyfield fight on North Star Oasis, and the governor knocks out Holyfield. Well, it doesn't look like he's down for the count. And the white glove has been thrown. There are a lot of followers here. $1 million raised for charity vision. And just a reminder, this was last night's fight in Salt Lake City. You are watching this on North Star Oasis.
You watched it as it happened. The Romney corner in the second round throws in the towel. So you're a winner. And still heavyweight champion of the world. Help me welcome Lee Peters from the World Boxing Council here into the ring. He has a very special presentation.
Thank you, Tim. The World Boxing Council is very proud and excited to be part of this activity here. And we would like to present these world champions, charity people, world champion belt buckles from the WBC, World Boxing Council, Marisa.
Still to come, ladies and gentlemen, an 8-round lightweight championship bout for the WBC, USNBC. I want to grab Mitt for just a second. I know you want to say some things to this crowd, but isn't the first rule of politics never to let them see you sweat?
I'm afraid you saw some sweat tonight, that's for sure. Listen, this was great fun. You guys are terrific for being here and supporting Charity Vision, and to the champ for coming here all the way from Atlanta and doing that. This is one of America's really good guys. He's a Christian at heart. He's got 11 kids. He doesn't smoke. He doesn't drink. I'm not going to ask you to be a Mormon because I know he's working on his own religion. So anyway, I just want to tell him thank you for being here, helping us out. I know I was asked beforehand, who in the world negotiated this bout where I had to fight someone like that? The answer is John Kerry, of course. And I told him, look, I'm happy to fight anybody as long as Candy Crowley isn't the referee. And I said, listen, please, champ, don't beam my brains out, because if you did, I'd have to become a Democrat. But you know, after tonight, it went so well. I was so happy tonight. I'm ready to take on Harry Reid's exercise equipment next, so I'm lining up for that bout. I was told that we were going to box by the Marquita Queensberry rules. That way the fight could be as clean as Hillary Clinton's server. But I fought people who fight different ways, you know. I mean, fighting Evander Holyfield is a little bit like fighting the New York Times, except Evander doesn't hit below the belt. And of course, we had planned this bout earlier, but Mayweather and Pacquiao asked us not to upstage their event, so we held off a little bit. But you know, I'm embarrassed to say that after it was all over, you saw Evander and I hugging each other, and he whispered in my ear, he said, "You know what? You float like a bee and sting like a butterfly." So I want to ask the champ a couple of questions before he takes off and gets back to Atlanta. Champ, when did you get started? When did this whole thing start for you?
I started at 8 years old.
Wow, 8 years old. Who's the biggest guy you ever fought?
Well, this guy was 7'2", and I weighed about 100 pounds. He weighed 318, I weighed 218. Like the guy out of Russia.
Who threw the hardest punch at you?
Well, George Foreman hit with the hardest punch.
That's a good man. So I just want to know, as you can tell, I'm not a boxer. And don't laugh so hard, come on. But I wonder, in a bout like George Foreman's bout or others you had, in these big things, do you have a strategy for what you're going to do round by round, or is it you just go in there and give it whatever you got?
Well, round by round, it's all depending on what happened in that round that I'm doing for me to make the adjustment the next round.
Yeah. Okay, I want to ask a question about that last bout we saw to Vegas. A lot of people were disappointed. What's your read on the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight? What did you think about it?
Well, it was a fight. It was a fight. And a lot of people don't understand that type of fighting that Floyd Mayweather do. Now, Floyd, he's a genius in the game of boxing. If you can't catch him, he'll keep moving. And so it don't work out for the fans. It only work out for him. He's undefeated. So if you're undefeated, will you make adjustment? Unless you have to.
Okay, I got one more question. We're going to let you get back. One more bout, you understand, and this is actually a title bout that you're going to see in a moment. But I want to ask, there's some of us that wonder whether, you're only 52, right? It's a very young man. I mean, this guy, the physique is extraordinary, right? Can we possibly see another bout in your future? I mean, I'd like to see you defend another championship, my friend. What do you think? Is there any chance of that happening someday? I hope so. You guys agree? It would be nice?
Well, like I told everybody, I said, once I turn the engine off, I'm not going to turn it back on. So, I did everything that I wanted to do in the game of boxing, and I wanted to retire as a champion, and I got an opportunity to become a champion. I became it, and it's just, at some point in time you have to leave, and I've done it, and I'm good.
And that was last night in Salt Lake City, Utah. Now, if we can take a quick look at my computer screen, Dallas, bring that up. And what you see here is the work that Charity Vision does. If you go to charityvision.net, we'll just look at some of these. They have a Cairo Eye Center in Cairo, Egypt. The Eye Foundation Hospital in Lagos, Nigeria. Just pick up Thailand here, or Burma, Deseret, Burma, Rangoon, Burma. Here, closer to the United States, they have Fudem, San Salvador, El Salvador. They do a lot of work around the world. Bolivia, National Institute of Ophthalmology in La Paz, Bolivia. And that's the kind of work that they do. And again, that event last night raised $1 million, provides 40,000 eye surgeries around the world. And if you do want to support the work that they do, that's charityvision.net. Now, moving on to All aboard segment. Another railroad incident occurred this last week, so we're going to go right to the footage here. This is from the National Transportation Safety Board. And since there is no audio, I will just continue to talk throughout some of this. But what you're looking at was last week we had the Amtrak derailment in Philadelphia, and it was not a good thing. There's talk now that a projectile might have hit the Philadelphia train before it had derailed. The SEPTA, Southeast Pennsylvania Transit Authority trains traveling through the area, they had been hit not too long before the derailment. 2 passengers on a southbound Amtrak train told the Philadelphia Inquirer that something shattered the window on their train as it passed the same area. And it appears, again, this is just my speculation, is that the train was going 70 miles an hour until something hit the train, and then for passenger safety, I believe that the engineer pretty much gunned it, and then from there he wasn't able to slow back down to get past the curve, and he was traveling at twice the posted speed limit. Bastian is the name of the engineer. He has interviewed with the NTSB. He was known to be a safe train driver. A friend of his said that it's ingrained in him. He knew it. I'm sure he knew he was entering a speed restrictive curve. He knew that he had been on that route for many years. He knew it inside and out. It's going to be interesting to see what the total, what the results of that investigation come out to be. But it was a really sad day last week as 7 or 8 people lost their lives in Pennsylvania, something that could have been entirely avoided. But right now what we're hearing is that the train crash happened just after a House vote on Amtrak funding. And we'll show the clip. This is becoming the Democrats' clarion call for infrastructure spending.
Let's go now to the chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Pennsylvania Congressman Bill Schuster. Sir, thanks for joining us today. I know this is a tough time for you today in your state and what you're looking at in these horrific pictures. Ironically, at the same time, members of Congress today are debating and talking about funding and a budget for Amtrak. What can you tell us?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me on your program, and our thoughts and our prayers are with those victims of that horrific accident, and our thanks goes out to the first responders for their response, and Mayor Nutter, who's doing a great job. The Appropriations Committee today has been debating that. I think it's important that we wait and see what happened there, what was the cause of the accident, before we start to have knee-jerk reactions. And the NTSB, we've been in constant contact with them. They're doing their job, and we're waiting to see why this accident occurred before, as I said, we have knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah, we already have the Appropriations Democrats calling for full Amtrak funding in wake of this crash. I mean, you understand what they're doing. This is their position, and they're using the emotion of the time to say, look, you know, if we had had more funding, maybe ... What do you say to that?
Right. Well, as the authorizing committee, we've authorized $1.4 billion plus a grant program we want to put in place to help the states make the investments needed. But as I said, I think we need to wait and see what the results are, what happened in Pennsylvania, and based on those facts and what happened in the accident, then address the situation at that time.
It's interesting because in Amtrak's own press releases that it sends out, it actually points out the fact that they need better infrastructure. As a federally run operation, how do you respond to that?
Well, one of the things Amtrak has always said they need more funding, but we in the House approved a reform bill for Amtrak, and they also need to operate more efficiently. They need to operate more like a business, and that's what we put into our reform bill, which we passed in March on a bipartisan vote to do things like keep the profits from the Northeast Corridor in the Northeast Corridor. Today, it's the only profitable part of Amtrak, and they take those dollars and distribute them across the country. So part of our reform is to keep those dollars in the Northeast Northeast Corridor because those are the folks that are paying for it. And you have the most important rail corridor in the country in the Northeast Corridor, not just because of Amtrak, but because transit and Amtrak all use that corridor. Over 200 million people ride those rails every year.
Yep.
And it's very important to the nation that we make sure we pay attention to what's happening there and do what we need to do.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, because viewers who are watching all across the country maybe aren't as familiar with the fact that this is a mode of transportation for you and for me and so many people who live in this part of the country. Congressman Bill Schuster of Pennsylvania, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gretchen.
So here we have the Democrats coming out of the White House want $1 billion for additional spending on infrastructure. Here's the thing, infrastructure did nothing for going around a curve at 106 miles an hour when the posted speed limit was 50. So exactly what? Well, I did hear that Chris Matthews from MSNBC says, "Oh, we have eminent domain. Can't we straighten this thing out? I mean, what's the effect?" Well, yeah, but that's not exactly the answer. Now, I will admit that there are a lot of problems with Amtrak. I have followed this for many, many, many years. As a matter of fact, I had a conversation with former Amtrak President David Gunn about problems that were facing the railroad back when Mr. Gunn was the president of the railroad. Actually, I had also talked to George Warrington back in 2000 when he was the president of Amtrak. So, there are a lot of problems. But one of the things is that when Amtrak was created, the Northeast Corridor essentially from New York down to actually, it might even go up as far as Boston. But all the way from Washington north up to New York or Boston, the Northeast Corridor, that is owned by Amtrak. That is not owned by your freight railroads. Now, the corridor where the Empire Builder that runs from Chicago to Portland or Chicago to Seattle, coming through the Twin Cities, that's owned by a host of different railroads, Union Pacific, Burlington Northern Santa Fe. I think even the Canadian Pacific might own some miles of track. But the fact is, Amtrak does not own this infrastructure here. They own the Northeast Corridor. That's probably the most profitable line that Amtrak runs, but then the areas that are not part of that area, are been money losers. And part of it's just the fact that it's a government-run operation. So does that mean that reform should happen in Amtrak? Absolutely. And I think Bill Schuster's H.R. 749, which was passed in March, bipartisan vote, and 6 Republicans and 6 Democrats were co-sponsors on this piece of legislation. And I think it's a starting point in what to do about Amtrak and how to fix it. But right now, let's take a look at what John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, has to say about the White House call for more spending on Amtrak and the infrastructure.
Beginning from Democrats that Amtrak was not well funded enough and that Republicans have historically...
Are you really going to ask such a stupid question? Listen. They started this yesterday. It's all about funding. It's all about funding. Well, obviously, it's not about funding. The train was going twice the speed limit. Adequate funds were there. No money's been cut from rail safety. And the House passed a bill earlier this spring to reauthorize Amtrak and authorize a lot of these programs. And it's hard for me to imagine that people take the bait on some of the nonsense that gets spewed around here.
Well, that was Speaker Boehner's reaction. So what do you think about this whole debate about Amtrak with more infrastructure spending? And what do you think about John Boehner's response? Let us know. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook. Or like us on Facebook, at North Star Oasis. We would like to hear from you and sound off on this particular topic. So now, when exactly was Amtrak created? What does it do? Well, I'll tell you what. This month is the 44th birthday of Amtrak. Let's take a look. May 1st, 1971.
On this day in 1971, the first Amtrak train hit the rails. For years, private companies were running railroads across the country and losing money all along the way. Congress eventually passed a law to create Amtrak as a for-profit corporation. Of course, it's never really made a profit. The Carter White House got rid of thousands of miles from Amtrak's network, and the Reagan administration proposed selling it. But tens of thousands of people use Amtrak every day, and it's drawing more and more riders each year after Americans first got on board. 44 years ago today. When news breaks out, we'll break in because breaking news changes.
Well, and we're going to go right to another clip, and this is actually from 1971 on WBBM television. And this is some of the issues and the debates that were occurring related to the establishment of Amtrak. It went from 22 different or 26 different railroad operators down to one single one. Passenger rail, really, intercity passenger rail, it is a monopoly run by one quasi-government company.
Senate Majority Leader Mike Mansfield has attacked rail packs, the Nixon administration's proposal for saving American passenger train service. Mansfield calls the rail packs plan a fraud and an outrage. He says it would mean an immediate halt to nearly half the nation's present passenger train service. Transportation Secretary John Volpe, appearing on the CBS News broadcast Face the Nation, faced some tough questions about rail packs from reporters who were obviously concerned about cities that were being left out.
But what kind of a service is it that excludes the city of Cleveland and excludes so many runs to Canadian cities and cuts down generally and continues the trend of less and less passenger service? How can it hope to attract new passengers to save itself?
Well, the fact is, Marty, that within 5 to 7 years from the calculations we had made, there would be practically no railroad passenger service left in this country, except possibly in the Northeast Corridor alone. And that would probably be one drain, probably Boston, New York, Washington.
Are you excluding suburban trains from this?
No, the commuter trains are not touched by this.
They're excluded from your...
Yes, they, in most cases right now, are contracting with railroads to have commuter service provided. And that isn't touched at all under the Rail Packs plan. But the fact is that looking at this picture, with the fact that it would cost you anywhere from $300 to $400 million, as a matter of fact, there was a bill introduced in the Congress for a $450 million subsidy to operate the trains. Well, it was our viewpoint that it would be a great deal better to take this whole passenger service operation, put it into a semi-public corporation, the same as ComSat, and allow it to stand on its own 2 feet and have one corporation, as will be the case now, instead of 22 corporations operate railroad passenger service in the country. Now, it is true that some lines have been dropped, but the fact is that the people have not patronized them. And what we're hoping to do is that as we develop these runs, as we put new cars on, as we shift some of the old equipment, particularly from New England, that you and I particularly are very, very familiar with, we believe that we will attract a great many additional passengers, and there's nothing to prevent us from adding trains as we move along.
Well, according to the inflation calculator at the Minneapolis Federal Reserve, that the $450 million subsidy back then would have been $2,664,649,209.46 today, in today's dollars. That's how much a 1971 investment of $450 billion was. And where has that money gone? That's the question that others have asked, and that's the question I've asked. And so let's take a look at what John Stossel has to say.
Amtrak, our government railroad. It was created 40 years ago after a senator said a government rail company would be the last great hope to save rail passenger service. So how's that working out for us? Randall O'Toole of the Cato Institute specializes in transportation. How's it worked out for us? We still have passenger trains.
We do have passenger trains, and they're hemorrhaging money. When Amtrak took over, the Congress actually believed that it would be able to pay for itself, that out of rail fares. And at the time, rail fares were cheaper than airline fares. So they thought they'd get a lot of customers. But since then, airline fares have dropped dramatically, rail fares have gone up, and the costs of running Amtrak have gone up even faster, so the subsidies are huge. And
well, wait, let's break this down. They thought that the costs would go down because costs often do, and they thought they could manage it better. Government always thinks that. Could make the same argument for government health care. But they didn't regulate freight rail. And there we have this chart. The prices did go down. If we measure this from the beginning of Amtrak prices went up, freight went down.
And if you look at the chart, you notice that they stayed about the same until about 1980 when we deregulated the freight lines. We got the government out of regulating the freight lines, and then freight went way down. But with government regulation on Amtrak, Congress imposed telling Amtrak how they have to manage their labor and where they have to run trains. The cost just went up.
And one result is that they run trains from New Orleans to Los Angeles, for example. That's the most expensive subsidy. You've ridden this train.
I've ridden this train. It goes through a desolate landscape. It takes a long time, and it only goes 3 days a week, and it has the lowest ridership of any major Amtrak train and some of the highest costs.
So get rid of it.
Get rid of it, except for there are politicians whose district it passes through who want to keep that train going.
So the result is the ticket price is $452. So this is a train ride for rich people. You can fly there much more cheaply, take the bus much more cheaply. Plus, the taxpayer pays a subsidy of $437 a ticket.
It's 4 times as great as flying.
Now, the government lovers would say, well, the private transportation gets a subsidy too. The taxpayer makes a contribution to flying and driving.
There are subsidies to flying, but those subsidies do average to about a penny a passenger mile, as opposed to 27 cents a passenger mile for Amtrak.
So why don't they privatize Amtrak?
Well, they privatized railroads in other countries. Japan privatized its railroads, and they're now making a profit. Britain privatized its railroads, and while they do get some subsidies, for the most part, they're being very innovative, and they're attracting more passengers faster than European railroads.
And making a profit.
And making a profit. And if we privatized the passenger trains here, I think we would get some passenger trains that would be much better than Amtrak. We might get fewer passenger trains. But the irony is that Anthony Haswell, who's called the father of Amtrak because he originally proposed to create Amtrak back in the 1960s, now believes it was a mistake and thinks we ought to privatize it. Politicians want to hang on, politicians want to control so that they can claim that the reason why you have a passenger train to ride is because you elected them and you need to vote for them again.
Another of their arguments is that trains are green. It's not like the cars which pollute. The train is clean.
Well, trains, most Amtrak trains use diesel locomotives, and they use the same kind of fuel that our cars and trucks use, and they pollute. They use a little bit less energy than the average automobile today, but automobiles are getting more fuel efficient, much faster than trains.
And the bus
is the greenest of all. The bus uses about 1/3 as much energy and emits about 1/3 as much pollution as Amtrak for intercity buses. And it's not just green. There are bus routes all over the country where the local bus companies are providing faster, more frequent service at far lower fares than the competing Amtrak trains that are government subsidized.
But the politicians don't find that glamorous, and they don't control it, so they're not as thrilled with buses. Last point, a criticism. In case our viewers are skeptical about him. This is from a transportation blogger who likes big government. The interstate highway system is perhaps the single biggest government intervention in the economy. Reading O'Toole, that's you, you'd think it was a wonder of the free market.
Well, the interstate highway system worked. It was a government program that did work, and it worked because Congress said, first of all, it's going to be funded by the users. We're not going to have general taxpayers funded. It's going to be funded out of gas taxes and other taxes on the users. And second of all, we're only going to build it as the money comes in. We aren't going to borrow a wad of money and then build it and hope the money comes in. If we had designed Amtrak the way we designed the interstate highway system, where we put it on a pay-as-you-go basis, it might have worked. But we didn't. We decided to have the government fund it, and that actually was the problem. Too much money is the problem.
Well, I ride Amtrak to Washington. I thank you for your subsidy. I don't deserve it, but I get it.
Well, to highlight the point about government subsidies and what the price is, I just chose on their Amtrak website, and Dallas, go ahead and put this on the computer real quick. Look at the Empire Builder, Amtrak's line that comes out of the Twin Cities, and for one reserved coach seat from St. Paul over to Montana, West Glacier, Montana, $144, that's just for one coach seat, $320 for an upper level reserve coach seat on the flexible plan. Premium plan, including a room, $610. Or there's another one that's $298. Now this is what I don't understand. It's the same train. One is listed as 7, the other is 27, but the fact is it is the identical train. And this is what does not make sense as far as going on Amtrak on the Empire Builder. So really it's the same, pretty much, Superliner roomette. It's the same room at twice as much, and that does not include a government subsidy for this ticket. And this is just to go from here to Montana. Now, can you imagine paying, well, we'll just take the $610 price. If you were to drive, you could do this including your hotel room on the one-way fare. You could actually do it cheaper. Your gas from here to Montana will probably run you, depending on the vehicle, of course, about maybe $150, maybe $200. And then, of course, with the room, that's another $100. You can do it on $300. Yes, you can actually do the Superliner roomette that they have on the bottom one on the 27 Empire Builder line. But the thing is, this is one way, and you add the return trip, and it's not efficient, it's not affordable, and that's the problem that we have outside of the Northeast Corridor. And again, I just selected this one on a whim, simply because I knew I could just pick up Amtrak real quick on the website. There just needs to be some changes, and David Gunn was making changes about 10 years ago. Unfortunately, he crossed paths with the White House, and that was George W. Bush's White House, who just pretty much wanted to break up Amtrak instead of reform it, which again is not necessarily a bad thing, but I really do think after 9/11 we should have some form of passenger rail. When the airline system completely shut down, what happened? In the Northeast Corridor, they were still going by rail, to get around, and that was a blessing, and that's how we traveled the country in the time of airline crisis, was by rail. So rail has a value. The problem is this railroad, as it currently exists, is too pricey and too inefficient. And that's really what I think people are looking at. They're saying, hey, there's got to be better ways of handling this. Sell it out. Maybe Warren Buffett can buy Amtrak, and we can put some oil cars at the very, very back, and maybe we'll have the kind of investment that would make it profitable again. That's just, a quick theory here. But anyhow, we only have just a short amount of time left, and we're going to give you a preview since that's our All Aboard segment. There's going to be more discussions I know that we'll have on Amtrak. This is just a quick primer. We'll dig in more deeply as time progresses. And this is not going to be the first time that we've heard about it, not the first time Amtrak's in the news. But my producer, cameraman Dallas Pearson, and I were at the Southwest Metro Mustang Club's car show today at Apple Ford in Shakopee. And so we're going to go with, that's going to be our theme for next week. We can go, it's transportation. We're going to go right from rail over into cars. Let's take a quick look at next week. Ford Mustang. This is the 50th anniversary of the introduction of the Ford Mustang, one of Ford's best-selling lines, possibly Ford's best-selling line. So this is just a preview of what we're going to give you next week here on North Star Oasis. But that is our show for this week. So thank you so much for watching us, and we will see you next week.